I want to go to our London contributor, Jonathan Sacerdoti. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk about the reaction outside of Paris, outside of France. And it seems that we talked a lot about the wake-up call, and the wake-up call is also to Britain.
It's true, people keep talking about this being a wake-up call, but then on the other hand, we've heard that before. We heard that after the 7/7 tube bombings in London. We heard that after the beheading of Lee Rigby in broad daylight on the streets of London. So those people who've been waiting for other people to have a wake-up call might still in fact be watching them sleep as we speak, and I think that's part of the problem. There's a very big difference between those who've been saying for years there's a problem brewing here and those who've been saying in reply to that, no, there isn't. These are lone wolves. They're crazed lunatics. This has nothing to do with Islam. These are all phrases that we hear trotted out almost instantly as soon as any of these sorts of attacks take place anywhere in Europe. Just to give you an example, the BBC, as soon as the Charlie Hebdo brutal terror murders happened, started interviewing as many Muslim leaders or community figures as they could, talking about a potential backlash against the Muslim community. Admittedly, an important thing for the country to realize it should not engage in. However, when this happened today, that people were taken hostage in a kosher supermarket, Jews preparing for the Shabbat, buying their groceries for their dinner that evening, there was no effort on the part of these channels to interview people about the existing backlash against Jewish people. And as we saw with the cartoonists who were gunned down, massacred in their office because they upheld freedom of speech and the right to mock anyone and everyone, including Islam, well, we saw that Jews are in fact also always a target. They don't need to have done anything. There were no cartoons that these shoppers engaged in. They did not insult anyone's prophet. They did not in any way draw any pictures which could be said to insult Islam. And yet these Islamic fundamentalist terrorists took them hostage in that shop, and now at least 4 of them are dead. And so what we need to realize here, I think, in Europe, and that what there's a growing realization of, is that really there doesn't need to be a provocation in order to prompt this sort of terror attack.
Yeah, but I'm really cautious with what I'm trying to understand here, because just a day before, when they killed the police, and he said the policeman he was on the ground, and he said that he is Muslim, and they shot him in the head after he said that he's Muslim. I don't know if it's just anti-Semitism, because maybe that was part of the plan, and this is what I'm trying to understand. This was very clever move to, at one point, target police officers and target Muslims also in the streets, let's say just the day before, and the day after to go to a kosher supermarket and target Jews.
I think the situation is this. Anyone that studies with some degree of seriousness Islamic fundamentalism recognizes that there are a series of enemies who those people deem justifiable as targets for killing. And they do, by the way, include other Muslims who are doing the bidding, as they would see it, of the West. I would certainly suggest that in this particular instance, a French policeman of Muslim origin who is there guarding the Charlie Hebdo office and who is there trying to stop a killing carried out by these people is a legitimate target as far as they're concerned within that warped ideology. So I don't think we can be sidetracked by the idea that because they killed a Muslim police officer, they are in fact not targeting people because of their ideology.
Not sidetracked, but what I'm seeing is that, you know, the Muslim world is right now in fight with itself. It's Sunni against Shiite. We see that it's Al-Qaeda against Daesh, it's ISIS against Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah and Iran, and all this, like, this sectarian war that is happening. So I'm really cautious with saying that this is anti-Jewish act before we're saying that this is actually just a pure terror, evil act.
I think there can be very little doubt that the choice of a kosher supermarket on a Friday afternoon was less than accidental. And even if we can put aside any speculation on that part, what we do know is that the traditional enemies of Islamic fundamentalism, and this is any security expert that I've spoken to over the last couple of days, and indeed over recent months and years, will tell me that the traditional enemies of Islamic fundamentalism are the West at large, but also Muslims considered to be aiding the West, and Jews. There is no coincidence that Israel and America are known as the Great Satan and the Little Satan. It is something that if we look at the letters that have been seized from Al-Qaeda compounds that were taken over by the American forces who have been in the region over the years. We see it in their own private letters to one another, discussion of the priorities of who to kill, who to deal with first, Jews, Americans, Westerners, etc. So we can't really necessarily say that anyone is just caught up in the crossfire here. When I look, for example, at the history of these sorts of attacks here in the UK, within the last few years, there was a foiled attack and a convicted Muslim couple who were building a bomb that could have killed dozens to be used in Manchester, and they had been examining and looking at Jewish sites so that they could kill people there. It's definitely not a coincidence.
Yes, Jonathan Sacerdoti, thank you very, very much for this call with us.